in about mid-1930s, two anthropologists, Tom Hopkinson and someone else, Charles Madge, who had been bird watchers, interesting, decided to use some of the kind of techniques they'd adopted in bird watching to apply to humans, and they asked people to keep diaries, and this grew into an enormous ongoing archive, and people were asked to kind of, they would set them subjects, a bit like homework, and maybe every 3 months these people who agreed to write a diary would be asked to write about the medicines they used, what were the popular beliefs in their streets about the best way of curing a cold, how would you procure an abortion. I mean, so the health would be a kind of theme. And then 3 months later they would get a question about, do you like the police? When was the last time you had any contact with the policemen? Do you think the police are fair and unfair? And over the years they collected this enormous kind of archive of popular kind of, well, it's not popular, I mean, a lot of these people were very conscientious, took a lot of time preparing these diaries, and they have been invaluable in charting pre-war and early post-war attitudes to things like abortion or work in the home, allocation responsibility and so on. So that still goes on, and in fact tomorrow afternoon at the Rio there is a film which I'm dying to see, and I will see tomorrow afternoon, called Sleep Furiously, which apparently is by a German filmmaker. It's about, I think it's a fiction film about life in a Welsh mining community. But his parents were German Jews who emigrated and were settled on a Welsh farm. And this man, Gideon, I can't remember his second name, but he also does video diaries. He's done a lot of those 3-minute wonders at the end of Channel 4 News. And I think there's a lot of this work going on once again, this kind of documenting of people's experiences. So I think that tradition continues. You wouldn't know it from looking at most television or listening to most BBC radio, I have to say, at the moment. But I think it will come back again. I think, in other ways, obviously on the web particularly, this continual documentation continues.
They found the British state actually found it really useful to, they were actually virtually, what's the word before? Not privatised, the other one, nationalised, as an organisation within the Ministry of Information.
That's right. Stage, yeah. And in fact, after the war, mass observation became a commercial, not a PR, market research. Yeah.
But I wanted to take one step backwards from this. How people get involved with literature of any description, and as you say quite rightly, in the 10s and the 20s of last century, people, when you actually start talking to people who are 80 or 90, they're actually saying, they can remember, Wordsworth and something about daffodils, and that's about it, because they were told about daffodils, and that was a good thing to know about.
Yeah.
But when people actually had to go back to work, when they actually went to work, in 14, 15, 16, that you would have thought that, in fact, that all of their literary, expectations had disappeared. But they didn't. But one of the reasons, of course, is the fact that the organisations which they got involved with, in particular, the trade union movement and the political parties, certainly in the 30s, where it's not so much that people found literature, they were actually giving it to them.
Yeah.
And you see old copies of the Daily Working, there's a list of recommended reading.
Yeah.
And
Tribune as well. I
exactly.
think Tribune was a serious literary magazine.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you keep tripping over Jack London all over the place because of the Iron Heel, I think we shouldn't actually mention, but
Jack London's an interesting figure because I'd forgotten him. He is cited by he's cited by a lot of people, and he's someone who, certainly when I was young, was regarded as absolutely, the number one person whose books radicalised millions.
And then B. Traven.
People at the Abyss, the Iron Heel. But then his reputation has plummeted, isn't it? Actually, I'm going to get a glass of wine on it. His reputation has plummeted. And I think a bit like Hampson, they kind of not flirted, they were also very interested in notions of kind of Superman and
Nietzsche.
Nietzsche, yeah. And thanks very much. I don't know, I mean, does anybody here recently read Jack London? But I mean,
People of the Abyss, interestingly enough, is being reissued. Well, it keeps on getting put back, because I mean, obviously that's a classic London book, whatever you might feel about it. And the only copy we were able to get, which we didn't get, was a hardback at £20. But somebody is reissuing it. And you're talking about the trilogy, aren't you? Iron Heel, Revolution. I think there was another one. Was it? No, I think it was People of the Abyss, Iron Heel, and Revolution that people saw as his political ones, as opposed to Core of the Wild.
Yeah,
and this thing about drink, John
that's why his, I mean, reputation is plummeting. It's all about some bloody dog in Alaska who gives a toss, excuse me. But,
well, he was a wolf. I mean, he was.
But I mean,
he wasn't just a dog.
I mean, it's virtually Disney. I mean, you know, I mean, they did the version of it. You know.
There's Ben Travel as well.
I mean, exactly.
Treasure of Sierra Madre and all.
But I mean, that stuff, which is all about, I mean, people actually at work. I mean, even if they are actually creeping around Mexico looking for a revolution.
But I think there was this thing, I mean, with Jack London is an example, of course Ragged Trousers and Philanthropists, but there were a number of writers who seemed to galvanise people's kind of, you know, they may not have read many books, but they read, the few that they read had an enormous impact on them.
They had a vision. I mean, rather than, as you say, about, you know, like writing a book about writing books.
That's right, and they did connect to this larger vision of a political future that they, you know, they signed up to. So that's why I say, you know, there was, you know, for a while, and it's not always a good thing, but politics and literature seem to be reinforcing each other's vision that, you know, people could change the world. There was corruption out there, but there were good people, and if you, you know, joined the party of the good people, it would all happen. But it doesn't quite explain. Well, I'm interested in what people think about this anti-Americanism, because I do think it was pronounced, actually, amongst the British cultural left, that they thought everything American was sort of bad. And I think it was very positive.
It's quite the opposite with music, though. If you go from the 50s on, you think of that sort of black music and the way that music transformed, you know, folk everything in a way that was sort of seemed to be welcomed with open arms. So, I don't know.
Well, not by Hogarth, though.
No, but if you think again,
some of this argument still carry, you know, that, I mean, like folk, you know, I can remember going to a pub Columbia Road.
Well, you had to sing. If you came from Yorkshire,
no,
you had to sing Yorkshire accent.
And I'll tell you who was there. Mike Rosen was there, the children's author, when he was then, I mean, I liked, but he was part of a left-wing folk group. And some people turned up with electric guitars, and Mike and his comrades walked out. I mean, you know, the English folk music was sacrosanct. They didn't want any of this stuff to do with electric guitars, and so that I think that was still kind of quite powerful, even in the 70s. That the British youth had been seduced by rock and roll, whereas the folk tradition was pure and belonged to the people.
Is that tied up with class? You know, that there's a middle class rejecting it and the working class welcoming it. Sort of, can you divide it into those sort of categories?
People without a culture, I mean, sneering at other people who might have.